I hope you enjoy this story. Let's begin. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead as my fingers flew across the keyboard. Lines of code scrolled by on my monitor. But my mind wasn't entirely focused on the task at hand. A nagging feeling had been gnawing at me all day, and I couldn't shake it off. I glanced at the clock on my desk. 3:37 p.m. on a Friday night. I should have. I was home hours ago, but this project deadline was looming, and I needed to get it done. Still, something fell off. I reached for my phone, hesitating for a moment before dialing our home number. The phone rang once, twice, and 3 times. Just as I was about to hang up, thinking Emily might be asleep, someone answered. Hello. The voice was definitely not Emily's. It was deep, slurred, and unmistakably male. My heart rate instantly doubled. Who is this? I demanded, gripping the phone tightly. A low chuckle came through the speaker. Your wife's entertaining me. Hang up. The line went dead. For a moment, I sat there, frozen in disbelief. Then, like a dam bursting, a torrent of emotions flooded through me. Anger, fear, confusion, and betrayal all warred for dominance. I jumped to my feet, nearly knocking over my chair in the process. Grabbing my coat, I raced out of the office, barely remembering to lock the door behind me. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced, replaying recent events, searching for clues I might have missed. Emily had been distant lately, often coming home late from work. There were unexplained charges on our credit card. We'd been arguing more frequently over trivial things. How could I have been so blind? I muttered, slamming my hand against the steering wheel. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked on the street. My stomach churned. Part of me wanted to turn around and drive away to pretend this wasn't happening, but I couldn't. I had to know the truth. I got out of the car, my legs feeling like lead. As I walked to the front door, my hand shook as I inserted the key into the lock. Taking a deep breath, I turned the key and pushed the door open. The house was quiet, too quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears as I made my way upstairs. As I approached our bedroom, I heard muffled voices and movement. Without hesitation, I threw the door open. The sight that greeted me would be forever seared into my memory. Emily, my wife of 5 years, was in our bed with another man. Not just any man, but Brad Hastings, her boss. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Emily's eyes widened in shock and horror. Brad looked more annoyed than anything else. Ryan and Emily gasped, clutching the sheets to her chest. I can explain. I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing up. Instead, I pulled out my phone and started recording. What the hell do you think you're doing? Brad growled, scrambling to find his clothes. Get out. I finally managed to say, my voice is low and dangerous. Both of you get the fuck out of my house. Emily started to cry. Ryan, please let me explain. It's not what you think. I laughed bitterly. Not what I think. I come home to find my wife in bed with another man, and it's not what I think. Save your excuses, Emily. Just get out. Brad, now partially dressed, tried to approach me. Look, Mitchell, let's talk about this like adults. I stepped back, keeping my phone trained on them. There's nothing to talk about. Get out before I call the cops. Emily stumbled out of bed. Tears streamed down her face. Ryan, please. I love you. We can work this out. Her words only fueled my anger. Love me? Is this how you show love, Emily? By sleeping with your boss in our bed? Get out. As they hurriedly dressed and gathered their things, I kept recording. Part of me knew I was acting on pure emotion, but I couldn't stop myself. I wanted them to feel the humiliation I was feeling once they were dressed. I followed them downstairs, still recording. Emily tried one last time to talk to me. Ryan, I'm so sorry. Please, can we just talk about this? I shook my head, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. How could you do this to us? To our marriage? Just go, Emily, I can't even look at you, right? Now. As soon as they were out the door, I slammed it shut and locked it. Then, without really thinking about the consequences, I uploaded the video to social media. I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands. The reality of what had just happened began to sink in. My marriage, my life as I knew it, was over, and I had no idea what to do next. My phone started buzzing incessantly. Messages from friends and family who had seen the video poured in. Some expressed shock and sympathy, others expressed anger at my behalf, but I couldn't bring myself to respond to any of them. As the night wore on, I sat there in the dark, replaying every moment of my relationship with Emily, wondering where it all went wrong. How had we gone from being happily married to this? The betrayal cut deep, leaving a wound I wasn't sure would ever heal. The next morning, I woke up on the couch, my neck stiff and my head pounding. For a blissful moment, I thought it had all been a terrible nightmare. Then reality came crashing back, and the pain hit me all over again. I checked my phone. The video had gone viral overnight. There were hundreds of comments, messages, and missed calls. I scrolled through them numbly, not really taking anything in. A loud banging on the door startled me. I got up slowly, my body protesting every movement. When I opened the door, Emily stood there, her eyes red and puffy from crying. Ryan said, her voice hoarse. We need to talk. I leaned against the doorframe, suddenly feeling exhausted. I think you said enough last night, Emily. She flinched at my words but pressed on. Please, just let me explain. I never meant for this to happen. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside to let her in. As she walked past me, I caught a whiff of her perfume, the same scent I used to find so intoxicating. Now it just makes me feel sick. We sat on opposite sides. Ends of the couch, the space between us feeling like an unbridgeable chasm. Emily took a deep breath. Ryan, I'm so sorry. What I did was unforgivable. Know that. But you have to believe me, I never wanted to hurt you. I laughed bitterly. Never wanted to hurt me. How exactly did you think sleeping with your boss would make me feel? She flinched again. It wasn't like that. Brad. He promised me a promotion and said it would help our future. I thought I was doing it for us. My anger, which had been simmering just below the surface, erupted. For us? Are you kidding me, Emily? How the hell was I sleeping with him? Supposed to help us? I know it sounds crazy, she said. Tears welling up in her eyes. But things have been so tight lately with the mortgage and your student loans. I thought if I could get this promotion, we'd finally be able to start saving for a family. I stood up, pacing the room. So instead of talking to me about our financial worries, you decided to whore yourself out to your boss. Is that what our marriage means to you? Emily gasped, hurt flashing across her face. That's not fair, Ryan. I made a terrible mistake. I know that. But I love you. We can work through this. I stopped pacing and looked at her. I really looked at her. The woman sitting on my couch was a stranger to me now. No, Emily, we can't. You betrayed me in the worst possible way. There's no coming back from that. Ryan, please, she begged, reaching out to me. Don't throw away 5 years of marriage over one mistake. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. One mistake. This wasn't a drunken one-night stand. Emily, you've been lying to me for weeks, maybe months. How long has this been going on? She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. In a few months, she whispered. The admission felt like a physical blow. Months later, I repeated, my voice is hollow. And you never once thought about coming clean? How would this destroy me? I wanted to tell you, she said. But I was afraid. Afraid of losing you. Afraid of ruining everything we had built together. I shook my head, feeling a strange sense of calm descend over me. Well, congratulations, Emily. You've done exactly what you were afraid of. It's over. Her eyes widened in panic. No, Ryan, please. We can go to counseling. Work through this. I'll quit my job. Cut all ties with a brat. Please, just give me another chance. Another chance at what? Lie to me? Cheat on me? No, Emily, I'm done. I want a divorce. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and final. Emily broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. Ryan, I'm begging you. Don't do this. I love you. I'll do anything to make this right. For a moment, I felt my resolve waver. Part of me wanted to comfort her. To hold her and pretend we could go back to the way things were. But I knew we couldn't. The trust was gone, shattered. Beyond repair. I think you should leave, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce proceedings. She stood up, her legs shaking. This can't be how it ends. Ryan. Please, just think about it. Take some time. I walked to the door and opened it. Goodbye, Emily. As she walked past me, she paused. I truly am sorry, Ryan. I hope someday you can forgive me. I didn't respond. I closed the door behind her, leaning against it as I heard her footsteps fade away. The house felt emptier than ever. I looked around at the life we had built together, the photos on the walls, and the little knickknacks we had collected over the years. It all seemed like it belonged to someone else now. My phone buzzed again. It was a message from Brad. Delete that video now, or you'll regret it. I stared at the message. Feeling a fresh wave of anger washed over me. Who the hell did he think he was to threaten me? I typed out a reply. Go to hell, Brad. You reap what you sow. I hit send and then blocked his number. I knew this wasn't over and that there would be consequences for my actions. But at that moment, I didn't care. Let him try his worst. There is nothing left to lose. The next week passed in a blur. I filed for divorce, throwing myself into the process as a way to avoid dealing with the emotional fallout. My lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Sarah, warned me that things might get messy. Are you sure you want to go through with this? She asked during our first meeting. Sometimes couples can work through infidelity. I shook my head firmly. No, there's no going back. I want this over with as quickly as possible. Sarah nodded, making a note in her file. All right, but you should know. That video you posted could complicate things. Mr. Hastings might try to use it against you. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a headache coming on. Let him try. I'm not taking it down. As I left Sarah's office, my phone buzzed with a message from my supervisor, Dave Coleman. I need to see you in my office. ASAP. A sense of dread settled in my stomach. I had been so focused on my personal life falling apart that I hadn't given much thought to how this might affect my job. I headed straight to the office, trying to prepare myself for whatever was coming. Dave was waiting for me when I arrived, his face grim. He gestured for me to take a seat. Ryan, he began, his tone carefully neutral. I'm sure you know why I've called you in. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Dave sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. Look, I'm not here to judge what's going on in your personal life. But that video you posted is causing problems for the company. Problems? I echoed, feeling a surge of anger. I'm the one who was betrayed, and I'm causing problems. I understand you're upset, Dave said, holding up a hand. But we have a reputation to maintain. Clients are asking questions. It's not good for business. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the arms of the chair. So, what are you saying, Dave? He wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Ryan, but we're going to have to let you go. For a moment, I couldn't process what he was saying. You're firing me because my wife cheated. On me. Dave slid a document across the desk. Your contract allows for termination without cause. We'll provide a severance package, of course. I stared at the paper, feeling like I was in some kind of twisted nightmare. This is bullshit, Dave. I've given 5 years to this company. My work has always been excellent. I know, Ryan, and I'm truly sorry, but the decision's been made. You can clean out your desk now or come back after hours if you prefer. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'll do it now. I wouldn't want to cause any more problems for the company. As I packed up my belongings, my co-workers avoided eye contact. Whispering amongst themselves. I felt like a pariah, branded by my own pain and anger. Just as I was about to leave, Brad Hastings appeared in the doorway of my now former office. He leaned against the frame, a smug smile on his face. I told you you'd regret this, he said it, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Something inside me snapped. Before I knew what I was doing, my fist connected with his face. Brad stumbled backward, blood spurting from his nose. You son of a bitch, I yelled, lunging for him again. But security was already there, grabbing my arms and pulling me back. Brad wiped the blood from his face, his smug smile now a furious snarl. You're finished, Mitchell. He spat. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. As security escorted me out of the building, I could feel the eyes of everyone on me. My co-workers, people I had considered friends, watched in shocked silence as I was marched to the exit. Once outside, one of the security guards, a guy named Mike, who I'd always been friendly with, and gave me a sympathetic look. I'm sorry, man. For what it's worth, I think you got a raw deal. I nodded, too numb to respond. I watched as they carried my box of belongings to my car, feeling like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. As I drove away from the office for the last time, the full weight of what had happened over the past week and crashed down on me. In the span of a few days, I had lost my wife, my job, and my dignity. I pulled over to the side of the road, unable to see through the tears that had finally come. I let out a primal scream of rage and pain, pounding my fists against the steering wheel until they were sore. When I had no more tears left to cry, I sat there, staring blankly at the road ahead. I had no idea what I was going to do next or how I was going to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. But one thing was clear, this wasn't over. Brad Hastings and Emily had taken everything from me, and I was going to make damn sure they paid for it. The days following my firing blurred together. I spent most of my time holed up in my apartment, blinds drawn, ignoring calls from concerned friends and family. The humiliation of losing everything burned like acid in my gut. One morning, as I scrolled mindlessly through social media, a post caught my eye. It was a photo of Brad Hastings at some charity event, his arm around a petite blonde woman. The caption identified her as Jessica Hastings, his wife. I stared at the image. Studying Jessica's face, her smile seemed forced. Her eyes were tired and sad. Something about her expression struck a chord with me. Before I could talk myself out of it, I sent her a message. Hi, Jessica. You don't know me, but I'm Ryan Mitchell. I think we need to talk about your husband. To my surprise, she responded almost immediately. I know who you are, Ryan. I've seen the video. What do you want? I took a deep breath, then typed. To tell you the truth, and maybe get some answers. Can we meet? There was a long pause before her reply came through. Okay, tomorrow at 2 p.m. at Café Noir on 5th Street. I can't stay long. The next day, I arrived at the cafe early, my stomach in knots. I hadn't showered or shaved in days, and I'm sure I looked as bad as I felt, but I didn't care. This wasn't about me. Jessica walked in at exactly 2 p.m. She was even prettier in person. But up close, I could see the shadows under her eyes, carefully concealed with makeup. She slid into the seat across from me, her movements tinted. You have 15 minutes. Mr. Mitchell. Make them count. I nodded, gathering my thoughts. First, I want to apologize. I know my actions have probably made things difficult for you. Jessica's laugh was bitter. Difficult? That's one word for it. Do you have any idea what it's like to have your husband's affair splashed all over the internet? I winced. I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking clearly. I wanted to hurt them like they hurt me. Her expression softened slightly. I understand that feeling, but why did you want to meet me? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Because I think there's more going on here than just an affair. Brad, he's not a good man, is he? Jessica's eyes widened. Then quickly darted around the cafe. I don't know what you're talking about, Jessica. I said it gently. I've seen the way you look in photos with him, the way you just checked to see if anyone was listening. You're afraid of him, aren't you? Tears welled up in her eyes. You don't understand. I can't talk about this. I reached out, stopping just short of touching her hand. You can. I want to help you. She shook her head frantically. You can't help me. No one can. If I leave him, he'll take everything. My home, my money, and my kids. He's abusive, isn't he? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jessica's silence spoke volumes. Listen to me, I said, my voice firm but kind. You don't have to live like this. There are people who can help. I know a lawyer. A lawyer? Jessica interrupted, her voice rising. Do you think I haven't thought of that? Brad owns half the lawyers in this city. The other half are too scared to go up against him. I nodded, understanding her fear. I know someone who isn't from around here, someone who isn't afraid of Brad. We can do this together, Jessica. We can take him down. She looked at me, hope warring with fear in her eyes. Why would you help me? You don't even know me. Because it's the right thing to do, I said simply, and because Brad needs to pay for what he's done to both of us. Jessica was quiet for a long time. Then she took a deep breath. Okay, tell me about this lawyer. I smiled for the first time in what felt like ages. His name is Ethan Roberts. He's an old friend from college. If anyone can help us, it's him. And you trust him? Jessica asked, still hesitant. With my life, I assure her. He's the best there is. Jessica nodded slowly. All right, I'll meet with him. But Ryan? You have to promise me something, anything, I said. Promise me that no matter what happens, you'll help me protect my kids. They're all I have left. I met her gaze, seeing the fierce love of a mother in her eyes. I promise, Jessica, we're in this together now. We'll make sure you and your kids are safe. As Jessica left the cafe, I felt a spark of hope ignite in my chest. For the first time since that fateful night, I had a purpose and a reason to keep fighting. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It was time to reconnect with an old friend. The phone rang several times before a familiar voice answered. Ethan Roberts speaking. I hesitated for a moment, suddenly unsure of myself. Ethan? It's Ryan. Ryan Mitchell. There was a long pause on the other end. Ryan? Well, this is unexpected. It's been, what, 10 years? Yeah, about that, I said, running a hand through my hair. Listen, I know I didn't part on the best terms, but I need your help. Ethan's voice turned cold. My help? That's rich. Last time I checked, you made it pretty clear you didn't want anything to do with me. I sighed. I know, and I'm sorry. I was young and stupid. But this isn't about me, Ethan. There are people who need your help. Innocent people. And why should I care? Ethan asked, but I could hear a hint of curiosity in his voice. Because you're still the same guy who wanted to change the world, aren't you? The guy who went to law school to fight for the little guy. There was another pause, then Ethan sighed. All right, I'm listening, but this better be good, Mitchell. I took a deep breath and laid it all out. The affair, the video, and losing my job. Then I told him about Jessica and Brad. About the abuse and the fear. When I finished, Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Jesus, Ryan, you really stepped in at this time, didn't you? Yeah, I guess I did, I admitted. So, will you help? Meet me at my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp, Ethan said. And Ryan, don't be late. The next morning, I found myself standing outside a sleek office building in downtown Austin. Ethan's name was in the directory, his firm occupying the entire top floor. As I rode the elevator up, my stomach churned with nerves. The last when I'd seen Ethan, we'd nearly come to blows. All over a girl. Emily. The irony wasn't lost on me. Ethan's receptionist. A stern-looking woman in her 50s eyed me suspiciously. Mr. Roberts is expecting you. Go right in. I pushed open the heavy oak door and stepped into Ethan's office. He was standing by the window, his back to me. He'd filled out since college, his lean frame is now solid and imposing in a tailored suit. You're on time, Ethan said, turning to face me. That's new. I managed a weak smile. People change, F. His eyes narrowed at the old nickname. Do they? Because of where I'm standing, you look like the same reckless hothead who stole my girlfriend and ruined our friendship. I flinched at his words. That's not fair, Ethan, Emily, and I. It wasn't like that. Ethan laughed bitterly. Oh, really? Then how was it, Ryan? Enlighten me. I fell in love, I said quietly. It wasn't planned, it just happened. I never meant to hurt you, but you did. Ethan snapped. And now here you are, asking for my help because that same woman cheated on you. Karma's a bitch, isn't it? His words stung, but I couldn't argue. He was right. I deserved that, and probably a lot more. But Ethan, this isn't about me and Emily. It's about Jessica Hastings and her kids. They need your help. Ethan's expression softened slightly. Tell me everything. And I mean everything, Ryan. No bullshit. For the next hour, I laid out the whole mess. Tale. Ethan listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification or more details. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled under his chin. You've gotten yourself into one hell of a mess, Mitchell. I nodded, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on me. I know, but I can't. Just walk away. Not when I know what Brad's doing to Jessica and those kids. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Studying me. Then he sighed. All right, I'll help. But not for you, Ryan. For Jessica and her children. Relief washed over me. Thank you, Ethan. You don't know what this means. He held up a hand. Don't thank me yet. This isn't going to be easy. Brad Hastings has money and connections. We're going to need more than just your word and Jessica's testimony. I nodded. What do you suggest? Ethan tapped his fingers on the desk, thinking, we need hard evidence. Financial records, witness statements, or anything that shows a pattern of abuse and misconduct. And we need someone who can dig up dirt without getting caught, like a private investigator? I asked. Ethan nodded. Exactly. I know someone who might be able to help. Her name's Mia Lewis, an ex-cop turned PI. She's the best in the business. Can we trust her? I asked. Ethan's smile was grim. With our lives, Mia's as straight as they come, and she's got a particular hatred for men who abuse their power. I felt a glimmer of hope. Okay, let's do it. As I stood to leave, Ethan called Ryan out. I turned back. Yeah. His expression was unreadable. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about Emily. No one deserves that kind of betrayal. I swallowed hard. Fighting back the emotions his words stirred up. Thanks, F. And I really am sorry for everything. He nodded, a ghost of a smile on his face. I know. Now let's go make that bastard pay. As I left Ethan's office, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. We had a plan. We had hope. And maybe, just maybe, I had my old friend back. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan introduced me to Mia Lewis, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a sharper wit. So you're the guy who kicked the hornet's nest, she said when we first met, sizing me up. I hope you're ready for what comes next. I nodded, trying to project more confidence than I felt. Whatever it takes to bring Brad down. Mia's smile was predatory. That's what I like to hear. Now, let's get to work. We set up a makeshift command center in a rented office space. Ethan worked on the legal strategy, while Mia and I focused on gathering evidence. One afternoon, as I was poring over financial records Mia had somehow obtained, she burst into the room, her eyes gleaming with excitement. I've got something, she announced. 2 of Brad's former employees are willing to talk. They've got stories that'll make your hair curl. I leapt to my feet. That's great. When can we meet them? Mia held up a hand. Not so fast, hotshot. These people are scared. They're risking a lot by coming forward. We need to handle this carefully. Ethan, who had been on a call in the corner, hung up and joined us. Mia's right. We need to make sure these witnesses are protected. If Brad gets wind of this, he could make their lives hell. I nodded, chastened. You're right. So, what's the plan? Ethan thought for a moment. We'll set up a meeting somewhere neutral. I'll have a court reporter there to take official statements. Mia, can you arrange security? She nodded. Already on it. I've got a couple of ex-military buddies who owe me a favor. As they hammered out the details, I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. We were making progress, but every step forward felt like we were poking a sleeping bear. The day of the meeting arrived. We gathered in a small conference room at a nondescript office building on the outskirts of town. Mia's security team swept the place for bugs before giving us the all-clear. The first witness, a woman named Sarah, arrived looking nervous but determined. I worked as Brad's assistant. For 3 years, she began, her voice shaky. At first, it was just a little. Things, inappropriate comments, standing too close, but it escalated. As Sarah recounted her experiences, I felt sick to my stomach. The Brad she described was a monster, using his power and position to terrorize his employees. The second witness, a man named Tom, had a different but equally damning story. Brad had me do financial reports, he said, his face pale. He was embezzling money from the company, funneling it into offshore accounts. Ethan leaned forward, his eyes intense. Do you have proof of this? Tom nodded. Pulling out a USB drive, everything's on here. I kept copies as insurance. As the court reporter dutifully recorded their statements, I felt a surge of hope. This was the evidence we needed to bring Brad down. But my elation was short-lived. As we were wrapping up the meeting, Mia's phone buzzed. Her face went pale as she read the message. "We've got a problem," she said, her voice tight. "One of my contacts just spotted Brad entering the building." Panic swept through the room. Ethan sprang into action. "MIA, get Sarah and Tom out the back way. Ryan, with me. We'll create a distraction." As MIA hustled our witnesses out, Ethan and I headed for the lobby. We could hear Brad's voice, loud and angry, demanding to know where we were. Ethan squeezed my shoulder. "Ready for this?" I took a deep breath, steeling myself, as I'll ever be. We stepped into the lobby just as Brad was about to push past the security guard. His face contorted with rage when he saw us. "You," he snarled, lunging towards me. "You think you can destroy my life and get away with it?" Ethan stepped between us, his voice calm but firm. "Mr. Hastings, I suggest you leave. Now, unless you want to add us all to the list of charges you're facing." Brad's eyes widened. "Charges? What the hell are you talking about?" I couldn't help but smirk. "It's over, Brad. We know everything. The abuse, the embezzlement, it's all coming out." For a moment, I thought Brad might actually attack us, but then something in his eyes changed. Fear replaced anger. "This isn't over," he hissed, backing away. "You have no idea who you're messing with." As Brad stormed out, I let out a breath. Didn't know I'd been holding. Ethan clapped me on the back. "Nice work, partner. But the real fight is just beginning." Back at our office, we regrouped. Sarah and Tom were safely away, their statements secure. We had financial records, witness testimony, and a growing pile of evidence against Brad. As we sat around the table, exhausted but exhilarated, I looked at my unlikely team. Ethan, my old friend, turned ally. MIA, the tough-as-nails investigator. And somewhere out there, Jessica and her kids are counting on us to deliver justice. "So what's next?" I asked. Ethan's smile was grim, but determined. "Now? Now we prepare for war." The day of the trial arrived, bringing with a mix of anticipation and dread. As I straightened my tie in the courthouse bathroom mirror, Ethan appeared behind me. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his eyes meeting mine in the reflection. I took a deep breath. "I'm as ready as I'll ever be." "You think we have a shot?" Ethan's face was grim but determined. "We've got a solid case, but Brad's team is tough. It's going to be a fight." We made our way to the courtroom, where Jessica was already waiting, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. I sat down next to her, giving her a reassuring nod. "You've got this," I whispered. "Just tell the truth." The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise. The court is now in session. Judge Michaels presiding." As we stood, I caught sight of Brad and his legal team entering. Brad's face was a mask of cool confidence, but I could see the tension in his jaw. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, surveyed the courtroom. "You may be seated. Mr. Roberts, you may begin your opening statement." Ethan stood, buttoning his jacket. "Thank you, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we're here today to expose a pattern of abuse, both personal and professional, perpetrated by Brad Hastings." As Ethan laid out our case, I watched the jury's reactions. Some looked shocked, others skeptical. Brad's lawyer, a shark-like man named Joel Thompson, scribbled notes furiously. When it was Thompson's turn, he painted a very different picture. "The defense will prove that these allegations are nothing more than a vindictive attempt at character assassination, orchestrated by a disgruntled ex-employee and a wife looking for a big payday in divorce." Court. The battle lines were drawn. As the trial progressed, witnesses were called. I was one of the first to take the stand. Thompson's cross-examination was brutal. "Mr. Mitchell, isn't it true that you assaulted Mr. Hastings outside your former place of employment?" I gritted my teeth. "Yes, but a simple yes or no will suffice." Thompson interrupted. And isn't it also true that you posted a video online of Mr. Hastings in a compromising position without his consent? Yes, but that video showed. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. No further questions. As I stepped down, feeling defeated, Ethan caught my eye and gave me a subtle nod. He had a plan. Next up was Jessica. She took a shaky breath as she was sworn in. Mrs. Hastings, Ethan began gently. Can you tell the court about your relationship with your husband? Jessica's voice was quiet but steady. At first, it was good. Brad could be charming when wanted to be, but over time, things changed. How so? He became controlling, angry. If dinner wasn't ready on time, or if I spoke to another man, even just to be polite, he'd fly into a rage. Did he ever hit you? Jessica's eyes filled with tears. Yes, the first time was about a year into our marriage. He apologized afterward and said it would never happen again, but it did. Again and again. Thompson objected, claiming Jessica's testimony was prejudicial, but the judge overruled him. As Jessica recounted years of abuse, I saw several jury members wiping away tears. Even the judge's stern expression had softened. When it was Thompson's turn to cross-examine, he went for the jugular. Mrs. Hastings, if your husband was so abusive, why didn't you leave? Jessica's voice trembled. I was afraid. Brad always said if I left, he'd take the kids, that he'd ruin me, and I believed him. So you stayed for the money? Thompson pressed. Objection! Ethan shouted, badgering the witness. Sustained, the judge said sharply. Watch yourself, Mr. Thompson. The next few days were a blur of testimony. MIA took the stand, presenting the financial evidence she'd uncovered. Brad's former employees shared their stories of harassment and unethical business practices. Finally, it was Brad's turn to testify. He cut an imposing figure on the stand. His expensive suit and confident demeanor are a stark contrast to Jessica's quiet dignity. Mr. Hastings, Thompson began. How do you respond to these allegations? Brad's voice was smooth as oil. They're absolutely false. I've always treated my wife and my employees with respect. This is nothing more than a conspiracy to ruin me, led by a man who couldn't handle the fact that his wife preferred me. I felt my face flush with anger. But Ethan's hand on my arm kept me in my seat. When it was Ethan's turn to cross-examine, he was relentless. Mr. Hastings, can you explain these bank transfers to offshore accounts? Brad's cool facade cracked slightly. Those were legitimate businesses. Transactions. Really? Because our financial expert seems to think they're textbook examples of embezzlement. As Ethan systematically dismantled Brad's defenses, I saw the jury leaning forward, hanging on every word. Brad's responses became increasingly flustered and contradictory. Finally, Ethan played his ace. Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence. Exhibit C, a video recording. Brad's face went pale. Objection. This is the illegally obtained video Mr. Mitchell took. The judge peered over her glasses. Is this true, Mr. Roberts? Ethan smiled. No, Your Honor. This is a security camera. Footage from Mr. Hastings' office showing him physically assaulting a female employee. We obtained it through legal channels during discovery. As the damning footage played, Brad's expression crumbled. He knew it was over. In his closing argument, Ethan was eloquent and passionate. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've heard overwhelming evidence of Mr. Hastings' pattern of abuse, both in his personal life and his professional dealings. It's time to hold him accountable. Thompson's closing felt weak. In comparison, full of misdirection and attempts to discredit witnesses. As the jury filed out to deliberate, and Ethan turned to me and Jessica. Now we wait. The jury's deliberation lasted less than 2 hours. As we filed back into the courtroom, my heart was pounding so hard. I could barely hear the judge asking for the verdict. The foreman stood. On the charge of domestic abuse, we find the defendant, Brad Hastings, guilty. On the charge of embezzlement, we find the defendant guilty. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Jessica burst into tears beside me, and I felt my own eyes welling up. The judge's voice cut through the commotion. Order in court. Mr. Hastings, please rise. For sentencing. Brad stood, his face ashen. Brad Hastings, this court sentences you to 5 years in prison for embezzlement. Additionally, you will pay restitution to your company in the amount of $2.5 million. As for the domestic abuse charges, you will serve a concurrent sentence of 3 years. Upon release, you will be subject to a permanent restraining order, barring you from any contact with Jessica Hastings or your children. She turned to Jessica. Mrs. Hastings, in the matter of your divorce, this court grants you full custody of your children. Mr. Hastings will pay substantial alimony and child support, amounting to 60% of his assets and future earnings. As the judge's gavel fell, the courtroom erupted in chaos. Reporters clamored for statements, Brad's family protested loudly, and in the midst of it all, Jessica threw her arms around me. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you for believing me." I hugged her back, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "You did this, Jessica. You were brave enough to stand up to him." As the bailiffs led Brad away, I caught his eye. The look of the defeat on his face was almost pitiful. I approached him, ignoring the protests of his lawyers. "You did this to yourself, Brad," I said quietly. "I just exposed the truth." He glared at me, but said nothing as he was escorted out. Ethan clapped me on the back. "We did it, partner. Justice served." But the victory was bittersweet. As we left the courthouse, I spotted Emily standing by the stairs. She looked small and lost. A far cry from the confident woman I'd married. Ryan called out hesitantly, "Can we talk?" I sighed, nodding to Ethan and Jessica to go on without me. "What is it, Emily?" She wrung her hands nervously. I wanted to apologize for everything. What I did was unforgivable. "You're right," I said. My voice flat. It was. Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know, but I want you to know I never stopped loving you. What I did with Brad. It was a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life." I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was overshadowed by the memory of her betrayal. "I'm sorry, Emily, but that doesn't change anything. Our divorce is final. It's over." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I understand. I hope someday you can forgive me." As I watched her walk away, I felt a chapter of my life closing. It hurt, but it was also freeing. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. My divorce from Emily was finalized, and true to the judge's words, she got half of everything. The media coverage of Brad's trial had made finding work in Austin nearly impossible. Every potential employer seemed to know me as that guy from the viral video. One night, as I sat in my half-empty apartment, surrounded by moving boxes, Ethan stopped by with a 6-pack of beer. "So, what's next for you?" he asked, handing me a bottle. I shrugged. "Honestly? I have no idea. There's nothing left for me here." Ethan took a long swig of his beer. I've got a buddy in Denver. Runs a tech startup. They're always looking for good engineers." I raised an eyebrow. "Denver? Why not? Fresh start, new city. It could be just what you want. Need." As I thought about it, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in months. "You know what? Maybe you're right." Ethan grinned. "Of course, I'm right. I'm always right. It's why I'm such a good lawyer." I laughed, throwing a crumpled napkin at him. "And so humble, too." As we clinked our bottles together, I realized that, despite everything, I had gained something valuable through this ordeal, a renewed friendship. The Rocky Mountains loomed large on the horizon as I drove into Denver, packed with the remnants of my life in Austin. The air felt different here, somehow cleaner. Or maybe that was just my imagination, fueled by the promise of a new beginning. My first stop was the office of Mile High Tech, the startup Ethan's friend ran. The receptionist, a cheerful woman named Linda, greeted me warmly. "You must be Ryan. Tom's expecting you. Go right in." Tom Reeves, the CEO, was a laid-back guy in his 40s with a quick smile and a firm handshake. "Ryan, great to meet you in person. Ethan's told me a lot about you." I felt a flicker of anxiety. "All good things, I hope." Tom laughed. "Well, he mentioned you've had a rough go of it lately, but he also said you're one hell of an engineer. That's what I care about." As Tom showed me around the office, introducing me to the team, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time: excitement. These people were passionate about their work, and their energy was contagious. "So," Tom said as we returned to his office, "what do you think? Want to join our merry band of misfits?" I grinned. "When can I start?" The next few months flew by. I threw myself into my work, grateful for the chance to focus on coding rather than courtrooms. My co-workers were friendly and welcoming, never prying into my past. One Friday evening, as we were all heading out for the traditional end-of-week drinks, my team lead, Sarah, hung back. "Hey, Ryan," she said, falling into step beside me. "A bunch of we are going hiking tomorrow. Want to join?" I hesitated. I'd been keeping to myself outside of work, still wary of forming new connections. But Sarah's smile was warm and genuine. "You know what? That sounds great," as I found myself saying. The hike turned out to be just what I needed. As we climbed higher into the mountains, the fresh air and stunning view seemed to clear away the last lingering shadows of my old life. At the summit, as we sat catching our breath and passing around water bottles, Sarah nudged my shoulder. "So, mysterious Ryan, from Austin, what's your story?" I tensed for a moment, then relaxed. These people had become more than just co-workers. Maybe it was time to open up a little. "It's a long story," I warned. Sarah grinned. "Well, it's a long way back down the mountain. We've got time." So I told them, not every detail, but enough. About Emily's betrayal, the viral video, the court case. As I spoke, I was surprised to find that the pain had dulled. It was more like recounting. Wanting something that had happened to someone else. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then Sarah squeezed my arm. "Damn, Ryan, that's rough. But you know what? You came out the other side. That's something to be proud of." The others murmured agreement, and I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun overhead. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged somewhere. Months passed, and life settled into a new normal. I'd found an apartment with a view of the mountains, joined a local rock climbing gym, and even started dating again, casually. Then, one morning, I received a letter. With an Austin postmark. My heart skipped a beat when I saw Jessica's name on the return address. Slightly shaky hands, I opened it. "Dear Ryan, I hope this letter finds you well. I've been meaning to write for a while, but I wanted to wait until I had good news to share. First, I want to thank you again for everything you did for me and my children. Your courage in coming forward gave me the strength to stand up for myself. I can never repay you for that. I'm writing to let you know that we're doing well. The kids and I moved to a new town where no one knew our history. I started my own business, a small bakery. It's not much, but it's mine. And for the first time in years, I feel truly free. Brad is still in prison. I heard he's up for parole soon. But with the restraining order in place, I'm not worried. We're safe, and we're happy. I hope you found peace and happiness too, Ryan. You deserve it more than anyone I know. Thank you again for everything." Jessica, as I finished reading, I realized I was smiling. Despite all the pain and upheaval, something good had come out of this mess. Jessica and her kids were safe and happy, and I was building a new life, one day at a time. I sat down at my desk and began to write. Reply. Dear Jessica, I can't tell you how happy I was to receive your letter. As I wrote, I felt the last pieces of my old life falling away. The bitterness, the anger, the regret, all of it seemed to belong to a different person now. I glanced out my window at the mountains, their peaks gleaming in the morning sun. My new life was waiting, full of possibilities, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to embrace them.